Welcome back, all of my loyal viewers. This is the Midnight Skeptic, broadcasting out of Petaluma, California here. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Trump impeachment, supposedly. We're going to be talking about good news on the climate change front. And I'm going to be reviewing Rachel Maddow's Blowout book, and it's a good one. I just finished it about a week ago.
You are listening to The Midnight Skeptic on KPCA LP, Petaluma, California, 103.3 FM, streaming live on kpca.fm, and on Petaluma Community Access Channel 26 or 99 on ATT-Uverse. You can find us on YouTube by searching The Midnight Skeptic, and you can contact us at themidnightskeptic@gmail.com. Remember, think logically, think critically, and live joyously.
Okay, this is the Midnight Skeptic 2020. It's been reformatted a little bit by my very, very helpful producer, Dennis. And in celebration of that, I'm no longer going to wear my white pullover shirt. This red, loud Hawaiian shirt is going to be the official shirt of the Midnight Skeptic from now on. A quick shout out to a number of listeners. I'm going to try to cut the time of the shout outs down a little bit, so I'm not going to really go into their lives and what they mean to me and what they're doing with their lives. Stanley Gustafson down in Pacifica, and Geraldine Goldfinger out on Long Island, New York. Nelson and Alice Lydell in Sarasota, Florida. Bob, Sandy, Brad, and Martha Fisher and Darrell Larson up in Sonora, California. Dr. Dave Rubin in the Raleigh-Durham area of North Carolina. The local people, Tim Conrad, Tom and Nancy Throw, and then very, very important, my brother Brandon down in Santan Valley, Arizona. And if she's still listening, Karina Hilliard down in Patagonia, Arizona. I have not heard from her in, about 6 months, but I trust that she knows how to tune in to the Midnight Skeptic should she be desiring to do that. Quick feelings about the impeachment trial, supposedly. November can't come soon enough for me. It's our opportunity to rectify the horrible, horrible mistake that the voters made in 2016. This orange mistake must be gotten rid of in November in these elections, along with all his other enablers, you might say, especially the Kentucky senatorial race where Moscow Mitch is running against Amy McGrath, the Democratic challenger. She's a retired Marine Corps fighter pilot, and she is very, very, what do I want to say? With it as far as what this country needs and what we all need. So I know I shouldn't be pitching donations, but she's the one that I just tossed in $5. Actually, I donated $5 to votevets.org. And the reason I did that is because they specifically mentioned Amy McGrath in her Kentucky race against Mitch McConnell. it's just a travesty is what it is. The impeachment, maybe it was a mistake to do it because there was absolutely no way in hell that the Republicans in the Senate were going to convict Donald Trump and remove him from office. But tonight is kind of the official beginning of the election year. There's the Iowa state caucuses, and then shortly after that, the scene moves up to New Hampshire for an actual voting amongst Democrats to see who they want. I'm not going to express any preferences of my own, although I have them. All I'm really caring about is, can Donald Trump be defeated in November of this year? And I have my doubts about whether he's going to actually leave the White House should he lose the election. And the election, I'm quite certain, is going to feature some sort of interferences from Russia and their expert hackers who are going to attempt as best they can to influence our election. The Midnight Skeptic, over the 4 years that I've been doing this, has quite often veered into the political realm. And so on this new Midnight Skeptic 2020, I want to kind of get all that out of the way at first, and so I don't have to bring up the Orange Menace anymore. Originally, back in the George Bush administration, I joined the Union of Concerned Scientists. Now, this is, about 12, 13 years ago, because at that time they were allowing the lobbyists from the coal and oil industry to kind of dictate who got appointed to the EPA in that administration. Now, George Bush, I disagreed with almost all of his policy decisions, but he was not the complete jerk that Donald Trump is. And so I can have disagreements with Republicans or conservatives without really wishing ill of them. Donald Trump is not really a conservative. He is a emperor wannabe. And beyond disagreeing with his policies, I wish ill upon him. If he were to slip on a banana peel coming down the steps of the White House and, I don't know, breaking his neck or something, I would not be sad if that were to happen. Okay, enough of that. This country cannot survive another 4 years of the Trump regime and all of his Republican enablers. So I implore all of you out there to get out and vote in November of this year. It just, the country needs your responsible voting. Okay. This is an example of what the Trump regime has done. His hatred of Obama, President Obama, and Michelle Obama is such that if the Obama administration did something that is good for the people, or good for the environment, or good for our country in general, he's going to make sure to roll back. And this is what I'm going to talk to you about now is an example of that. Let me get my reading glasses on. Oh, the vagaries of old age. The Trump administration has taken another step toward dismantling Michelle Obama's school nutrition guidelines, proposing a new rule that could lead to more pizza and fries and less fruit and a smaller variety of vegetables. And they announced this on Michelle Obama's birthday, just to show you how unnecessarily cruel and petty the Trump administration is. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, who announced the rule changes on Obama's birthday Friday, said they were needed to give schools more flexibility, BS, and reduce waste while still providing nutrition and appetizing meals. The proposal also would allow schools to reduce the amount of fruit at on-the-go breakfast served outside the cafeteria. Under the proposal, schools would be allowed to cut the amount of certain types of vegetables served at lunch and legumes offered as a meat alternative also could be counted as part of the vegetable requirement. Okay. Oh, geez. This 4-year nightmare must come to an end soon. Please, voters, get out and vote. Okay. I'm not going to, I wrote this in my notes here. I'm going to try to not spend the valuable Midnight Skeptics time just Trump bashing, although, the first minutes of this show, I've done it. I want to be positive and relay good news to all my listeners, even on climate change and pollution issues. There is some good news out there. Microsoft promises to be carbon negative by 2030. Okay, I know talk is cheap, and actions are everything. But the fact that they're going to try to do this is quite a positive thing. Now, what does carbon negative even mean? That means all of their production facilities and research facilities and computer-generated business offices are going to, according to them, remove more carbon, meaning CO2, from the atmosphere than they put into the atmosphere through their actions. Microsoft is pledging to become 100% carbon negative by 2030. Now, that's only 10 years away, people. CEO Satya Nadella said Thursday that the commitment will happen, quote, not just across our direct emissions, but across our supply chain. It's a major step up from Microsoft's previous green pledges. The tech company has previously said its data center would be 60% powered by clean energy by the end of last year. Okay, did they hit that? But environmental groups have said that it has fallen short of such rivals as Google and Apple by relying too much on purchasing renewable energy credits. That means giving money to tree planting, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and other groups that work on removing carbon from the atmosphere or garbage from the oceans. Companies can do that, pledge money to plant trees, for instance, which theoretically removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Microsoft had previously set an interim goal of 70% renewable energy by 2023. It now says it will hit 100% renewable for all of its data centers and buildings by 2025. Google and Apple have already said they reached the 100% milestone. Amazon said it would run on 100% renewable energy by 2030. Microsoft is responsible for about 16 million metric tons of emissions per year, said Brad Smith, the company's president and chief legal officer. That estimate includes not just Microsoft's global networks of energy-chugging data centers, but emissions from making electronics components for its devices and from everyone who plugs in its Xbox gaming consoles at home. Microsoft is also starting a $1 billion fund for developing carbon reduction and removal technology. There are some Canadian firms now that are on a small scale producing machines that actually suck in atmosphere and removes the CO2 from the air and converts it into, for instance, airline fuel. Now, these are in the development stage, and they're testing it out to see if this actually works. And if it does, that would be an extremely good news for the planet, meaning all of us. Okay. Other good news. I made it a pledge to myself to try to be a bit more positive than constantly giving you bad news on how the environment is going. There is good news. I know the Earth and our ecosystem and our place in this earthly ecosystem is going from bad to worse until things start really getting done about it. But I really don't want to bum all my listeners out. Workers at Amazon. Okay. Workers criticize Amazon on the climate despite risk to their jobs. Meaning Jeff Bezos is threatening to fire these workers who publicly protest against Amazon's practices. Okay. Hundreds of employees are openly criticizing Amazon's record on climate change, despite what they say is a company policy that puts their jobs at risk for speaking out. The online protest was organized by a group called Amazon Employees for Climate Justice, an advocacy group founded by Amazon workers that earlier this month said the company had sent letters to its members threatening to fire them if they continued to speak to the press. Well, here's the press. I'm reading from it right now. This is an article from the San Francisco Chronicle. Last year, more than 8,000 staffers signed an open letter to the CEO and founder, Jeff Bezos, demanding that Amazon cut its carbon emissions, end the use of fossil fuels, and stop its work with oil companies that use Amazon's technology to locate fossil fuel deposits. Amazon said in a statement that it is passionate about climate change issues and already pledged to become net zero carbon by 2040. This other article that I read, I think Amazon said in it that Amazon, let's see, what did they say in this article? Amazon said it would run on 100% renewable energy by 2030. Okay, well, their pledge here is 2030, and their pledge in their official statement is 2040. Well, 10 years is 10 years, people. I applaud them for saying they can do this in 10 more years, meaning 2030. But it remains to be seen whether they actually succeed or not. 100% renewable energy by 2030. With the technology that we have nowadays, I think that's quite doable. The cost of solar panels and these huge mega arrays of solar panels, the price of them has come down so much that it is cheaper to do that than to rely on fossil fuels now. So it can only get monetarily more advantageous as the years go by to use solar panels and wind farms, for that matter. Okay, so much for pledges. That's good news. Okay, now, good news in the plastic garbage realm. Down in Mexico, there's a company called Ecoplástico Ambiental. You can Google this if you want. The site is in Spanish, so you'll have to hit the button that says translate this page. But it's in Jalisco, Mexico, and they build actual homes out of recycled plastic, and the recycled plastic kind of imitates a wooden plank-like thing that they can actually build houses with. And if you go on their website and take a look at the pictures of the homes that they build, a great many of them look to me to be, I don't want to say tiny homes, but rather smaller homes. And they're having a housing crisis in Mexico as well, where the poor people in Mexico can't afford to buy houses. The problem isn't as bad down there in Mexico as it is up here, say in San Mateo, San Francisco, Marin, and Sonoma counties, but they're making not only housing affordable down there in Jalisco, Mexico, and it is removing plastic garbage from their environment, which is a good thing. And the CEO of it, I traveled around their website and I couldn't get his last name. His first name is Ramon. I think it was Hernandez, but don't hold me to this. But he was a materials engineer from the University of Guadalajara. And so he started this company, and I wish him well, because removing plastic from the environment and creating more homes is, both of those things are good things for the world, for Mexico in particular, and for the environment. Okay. Another good news thing that I ran across: plastic-eating worms can help clean up the environment. Okay, now this is a research thing from Stanford University, just here in California, just down the road from Petaluma. I don't know if you can see this, but this is a piece of white styrofoam being munched by some mealworms. And if you go to their website, and you can find it by just entering styrofoam and mealworms, you can get this up to this website. It shows a big square piece of styrofoam, which is normally not recyclable, being munched on by thousands of these mealworms. The thing about it is, the mealworms, the microbes in the gut of the mealworms are capable of breaking down chemicals that go into making up styrofoam, and also some of the flame retardant and preservative chemicals that are put into styrofoam. Normally, we wouldn't think of ingesting those things on purpose anyway. But the mealworms eat the styrofoam, and they can also break down these very dangerous chemicals. And the mealworms themselves can be used as in feedlots for cattle and farms that ocean farms that raise fish, and the chemical breakdown doesn't seem to go up the food chain like most chemicals do. Ravenous mealworms so robust that they can digest plastic may be the solution to a worldwide pollution problem that is threatening wildlife on land and sea. Shrimp farms have already started using mealworms, not these particular mealworms yet, because the study is still ongoing. Stanford University researchers revealed all this Thursday. Now, this article is December 22nd, so this is roughly about 2 weeks old. Their study, published this month in the journal Environmental Science and Technology, found that yellow mealworms not only break down plastic, but also poop out chemicals like flame retardant added to plastics, and none of it bioaccumulates up the food chains. That is very, very good, and we need a clapping for that. So, another victory for Stanford researchers. Okay, this all means that the tiny larval creatures, which are easy to cultivate and commonly used as feed for farm animals and pets, could potentially be deployed en masse, to help rid the world of plastic garbage without harming the chickens, fish, snakes, shrimp, and even humans who eat them. We think this is a really promising solution for the future, said Anja Malawi Brandon, a doctoral candidate in environmental engineering down there at Stanford. So I applaud their efforts, and we should encourage environmental engineers down at Stanford to keep up the good work. Another bit of good news. All right. Let's see. This is the Google page for this Stanford research. Let's see. I'm just going to pick out the highlights here. But this goes along with the article I just read you about the Stanford researchers. The study is the first to look at where chemicals in plastic end up after being broken down in a natural system, meaning a yellow mealworm's gut. In this case, it serves as proof of concept for delivering value from plastic waste. In earlier work, Stanford researchers and collaborators at other institutions reveal that mealworms, which are easy to cultivate and widely used as food for animals ranging from chickens and snakes to fish and shrimp, can subsist on a diet of various types of plastics. They found that microorganisms in the worm's gut biodegrade the plastic in the process, a surprising and hopeful finding. However, concerns remained about whether it was safe to use the plastic-eating mealworms as feed for other animals, given the possibility that harmful chemicals in plastic additives might accumulate in the worms over time. This is a quote from one of the researchers. This work provides an answer to many people who asked us whether it is safe to feed animals with mealworms that ate polystyrene. This is said by Wei Min Wu, a senior research engineer at Stanford's Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, who has led or co-authored most of the Stanford studies of plastic-eating mealworms. Okay, anything on this second page? Brandon and Wu and their colleagues looked at polystyrene, a common plastic typically used for packaging and insulation, meaning that plastic popcorn that you get all the time to cushion things that are being sent through the mail or UPS or Amazon. It's costly to recycle because of its low density and bulkiness. And most of it contains a flame retardant called, hexabromocyclododecane, or HBCD. I'm not a chemist enough to know what the formula for this is, but whatever the formula is, it gets broken down by mealworm gut microbes. And it's commonly added to polystyrene. The additive is one of many used to improve plastics' manufacturing properties or decrease flammability. In 2015 alone, 5 years ago, nearly 25 million tons of these chemicals were added to plastics, according to various studies. Some, such as HBCD, can have significant health and environmental impacts, ranging from endocrine disruption to neurotoxicity. Because of this, the European Union plans to ban HBCD, and U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is evaluating the risk. Okay, this is the EPA in the Trump administration, and you know that their evaluation is going to come to the conclusion that chemical manufacturers are exempt from this. Mealworms in the experiment, this is the experiment down at Stanford, excreted, meaning pooped out, about half of the polystyrene they consumed as tiny, partially degraded fragments, and the other half as carbon dioxide. Well, that's not so good. With it, they excreted HBCD about 90% within 24 hours of consumption, and essentially all of it after 48 hours. Mealworms fed a steady diet of HBCD-laden polystyrene were as healthy as those eating a normal diet. The same was true of shrimp fed a steady diet of the HBCD ingesting mealworms and their counterparts on a normal diet. The plastic in the mealworm's gut likely played an important role in concentrating and removing HBCD. Okay, enough of that, but that's, I think, kind of good news. Plastics can be eaten. Okay, here's another. Okay, this is part of that other article. It's a black and white picture, but I'm going to hold it up anyway to see if you'd like to see this. This is a white sheet of polystyrene foam packaging plastic, and these little things are mealworms just eating holes in it. Okay, enough of that. Another bit of good news. Well, it's good news for us, not so good news for a local chemical plant. Chemical plant sued over years of improper waste disposal. And this falls into the category of environmental justice. Most of these chemical plants and refineries and things exist in low-income housing areas. And it's people of color that are more greatly affected by these types of things. Okay, 3 environmental groups have filed suit against a Pittsburgh chemical plant, the Pittsburgh here in the East Bay, not Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, alleging that for 5 years it dumped hazardous materials in an unauthorized wastewater treatment system or incinerated them in substandard furnaces. Corteva Agriscience, Corteva Agriscience, formerly known as Dow Chemical Company, Pittsburgh operations, manufactures fertilizers, insecticides, and personal care products at the 1,000-acre plant in eastern Contra Costa County at the north end of Leverage Road. Most of my listeners won't know where Leverage Road is, but it's a major throughway over in Contra Costa County leading to the town of Pittsburgh. The federal lawsuit filed in U.S. District Court in San Francisco on Thursday seeks to make Corteva prove that it has stopped the illegal disposal and corrected its record-keeping practices. They were trying to hide the fact that they did these things that they're being sued for. The lawsuit also seeks legal costs and penalties for violating hazardous waste laws. For years, people living around this dangerous facility, meaning low-income people, people of color, have suffered unacceptably high levels of asthma and cardiovascular disease, said Andres Soto, an organizer of the group of people who hired the legal team to bring this lawsuit. Okay, the rest of the article is on the back here. The company also disposed of some hazardous chemicals in a wastewater treatment system not approved for that use. As part of the disposal process, the poisons were kept in uncovered tanks, the lawsuit says. The groups filed the suit after growing frustrated with the failure of the EPA, the Trump administration's EPA, and the State Department of Toxic Substances Control to take action against the company. The agencies bickered over whose job it was before finally agreeing the EPA had responsibility. Well, forget that. They're not going to do anything about anything. Thank you, Trump administration. Quote, we really wanted the government agencies to do their jobs, one of the lawyers said, but we just couldn't wait anymore for environmental justice to rear its head. Okay. Okay, environmental. Okay, I'm looking. Okay, there's a. Oh, I don't have the article. Shoot, my bad. There's a rock formation called serpentine, and it's green colored, and it's found on a number of volcanic outflows in Hawaii, which is responsible for the green sand that you find on some of Hawaii's beaches. But serpentine has a property of decreasing ocean acid, the acidity in the oceans. There's a chemical process where waves from the ocean come in and strike the green sand, and the waters around these green beaches are measurably less in acidity than normal. And so there's a movement afoot by an environmental group, and if I had that article, I would be able to tell you what that environmental group is. But serpentine isn't unique to Hawaii. It can be found wherever there is volcanic activity. And get some of this green serpentine rock, crush it up into sand-like consistencies, and then spread it. Now, this may seem like a drop in the bucket, and in a way it is, but there is a possibility of doing something about the rising acidic levels in our oceans by just doing this. At least the near shore fishes and marine life and corals will benefit from this if we can get it going on a major scale. And it's not that expensive to crush up serpentine to help fight this condition that bleaches out the corals around, around the shoreline. Okay, a bit more good news. Elon Musk has pledged $1 million, and Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey has pledged $150,000, both to two organizations, #Team Trees and the Arbor Day Foundation. Now, planting trees is a way, one of many ways, to try to mitigate the growth of CO2 in our atmosphere, which we all know is a contributing factor to the rising of the temperature in the air. Planting trees, while a good thing, is not enough. Everybody agrees that that is a good thing, but certainly not enough. Some scientists overestimate how much trees can do, but in the process of photosynthesis, trees and other green plants, all green plants, take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and give off oxygen, O2, which is a good thing. But the way that deforestation has been going on lately, it's going to take a huge effort of tree planting in order to mitigate the damage that we have done to our forests. Okay, hundreds left out. Oh, here's an article. Okay, now I was talking before the tree thing about this chemical plant over in Pittsburgh, California, that is being sued for dumping harmful chemicals into wastewater treatment and then just dumping them into the air out off the smokestacks. NCAAP's warning on the energy industry. Now, I hate to say it, but the oil and gas industry has been funneling money to the NCAAP, and the chapters of the NCAAP have been cautioned about potential manipulation by fossil fuel firms. When utilities around the country have wanted to build fossil fuel plants, defeat energy efficiency proposals, or slow the growth of rooftop solar power, they have often turned for support to a surprisingly reliable ally, a local chapter of the NAACP. In 2014, top officials of the NAACP's Florida division threw their organization's weight behind an effort to stymie the spread of solar panels on residential rooftops and cut energy efficiency standards at the behest of the energy industry. Now, there's a number of states that are essentially Republican-controlled that are in the thrall of the oil and gas industries that want to make it harder for people to solarize their homes because, rightly so, the oil and gas industry sees solar power, solar rooftop panels, and windmills, offshore or on land, as threats to their existence. And rightly so. So they want to slow down the growth of solar power and wind power as much as they possibly can. Florida is one of them. Okay, most Americans know that the NAACP as a storied civil rights organization that has fought for equal access to public facilities, fairness in housing, and equality in education. Okay. Now, but on energy policy, many of its chapters have for years advanced the interests of energy companies that are big donors to their programs. Often this advocacy has come at the expense of the black neighborhoods, which are more likely to have polluting power plants and are less able to adapt to climate change. From New Orleans to San Diego, consumer and environmental groups have criticized power companies for using their largesse in minority communities to get church pastors, nonprofit groups, and organizations like the NAACP to back industry objectives. This is a quote now. The utilities have essentially asked communities of color to be props for them, said William Funderburk, Jr., an environmental lawyer and former board member of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. It appears utilities are turning back the clock 100 years, unquote. From 2013 to 2017, 10 of the country's largest utilities made about $1 billion in donations to the NAACP. Those contributions often went to groups representing minority communities, and many of the recipients promoted the fossil fuel industry agenda. Okay. Is nothing sacred? Well, that's a rhetorical question. No, nothing is sacred. Okay. Speaking of toxic chemicals, okay, this is another topic I'm going to go into. Okay, speaking of toxic chemicals, okay, this is an article from Aria Bendix, Business Insider. Toxic chemicals robbed U.S. children of over 160 million IQ points total. Scientists warn. The chemicals we've long feared the most, heavy metals like lead and mercury, are less of a threat to kids' developing brains than they were 2 decades ago. About 10 shows ago, I did a segment on the paint industry and how they lost a lawsuit. The state of California sued them. Sherwin-Williams, LN Industries, I can't remember the other paint companies. Anyway, still to this day, the paint companies do not acknowledge that lead is a neurotoxin to everybody, not just kids, but they say that it may not be healthy to have lead in your system, but they say nothing about the neurotoxicity of lead. Lead has been taken out of paint now. Lead has been taken out of gasoline. Back in 1978, I believe, lead in gasoline prevented engine knock. That was the reason it was in there in the first place. But communities, especially low-income communities of color, were built near freeways, and children of low-income families, especially those that lived in older houses built before 1978, still had lead-based paint covering the walls inside and outside. And after a long time, this paint tends to flake off and work their way into the systems of young kids who inhale this stuff and maybe even inadvertently eating a bunch of this stuff. Anyway, the paint companies still to this day refuse to acknowledge the neurotoxicity of lead. Okay, enough of that, but there are other chemicals that are equally bad. According, 2 new menaces may be taking the place of lead and mercury. According to new research from New York University, NYU, flame retardants resulted in a loss of 162 million IQ points among children in the U.S. between 2001 and 2016. The study, which was published Tuesday, this article was January 15th, so 2 weeks ago, published Tuesday in the journal Molecular and Cellular Endocrinology, looked at the 4 chemicals known to impact the brain of a developing child the most. Number 1, lead. Number 2, mercury. Number 3, pesticides of all shapes and sizes. And polybrominated diphenyl ethers. Okay, that's a mouthful. Polybrominated diphenyl ethers, otherwise known as flame retardants. Leo Transande, a pediatrician and public health researcher at NYU who conducted and co-authored the study, described these pollutants as hit-and-run chemicals. Once a child is exposed to them, there's no reversing the damage. Ouch. And lead, by the way, is not excreted in your urine or feces or anything. It's in your body for good. Kids' brain development is exquisitely vulnerable, Trasande told Business Insider, if you disrupt, even with subtle effects, the way a child's brain is wired, you can have permanent and lifelong consequences. The study found that lead cost U.S. kids 70 million IQ points during the 15-year period studied, while pesticides caused a loss of nearly 27 million IQ points during those years. Mercury, meanwhile, caused a loss of 2.5 million IQ points. Now, here's an aside. Mercury is the big bugaboo about the anti-vaxxers because mercury was part of the preservative chemical used in vaccines. Now, they no longer put mercury in it, even though it was not a loose chemical. It was part of the chemical makeup of the vaccines, and it is broken down and excreted. So there is no danger of the mercury in vaccines. Now, it's no longer even being put in vaccines because of the outcry and as a result of overcaution. So they just took the mercury out, and they're using other preservatives now. So all you anti-vaxxers out there, just come into the 21st century. Okay. The study also found that there is an economic cost to childhood brain damage. Trasande said that each individual IQ point is worth roughly 2% of a child's lifetime economic productivity. So if a child could potentially make $1 million over the course of their lifetime, they would lose $20,000 for every IQ point lost. A kid, and this is a quote from him, a kid's brain is the engine of our economy. If a child comes back from school with one less IQ point, maybe mom or parent might not notice. But if 100,000 children come back with one less IQ point, the entire economy notices. According to the researchers, IQ loss due to lead, mercury, flame retardants, and pesticide exposure combined cost the U.S. around $6 trillion from 2001 to 2016. Okay, real quick now, I want to have a book review of Blowout by Rachel Maddow. I just got through reading this about 2 weeks ago. And some of the character creeps that you see testifying and defending the Trump administration are mentioned in this book. Russian oligarchs and even a few Ukrainian criminal oligarchs. But it's not just about that. You get, she goes all the way back to the use of oil in our economy, back to the whaling days. She doesn't spend a lot of time on it, but that's where our economy started being dependent on oil of any source. Whale oil was used in lighting lamps and street lamps way back in the early 18th century. And well, that's one of the reasons that whales are endangered species nowadays. And then in Pennsylvania, oil derricks, those old-fashioned wooden-sided oil derricks, started producing more and more crude oil, which was refined into kerosene. That was the main use of oil back in the mid-1800s when the oil was first discovered. It was for lighting. It was to replace whale oil. It was the kerosene that was distilled out of this crude oil that put an end to the whaling industry. And there is gripes about that too from the whaling industry people. Okay, then the cars came along, and the crude oil was distilled into gasoline. And then, anyway, Rachel goes into all of this, and oil discoveries around the world have fueled crime and corruption amongst a lot of countries where oil was discovered, and which gave rise to oil oligarchs. And so the rest is history. But she is a very good writer. It was a real page turner. Blowout by Rachel Maddow. Okay, that is about the end of this edition of the Midnight Skeptic. And I will be talking at you and making another one of these YouTube things in another 2 weeks. And it's been nice talking to you all. Play out music. Okay, this is KPCA LP, Petaluma, California, and this is the end of the first reimagining of the Midnight Skeptic show. And like I say, in another 2 weeks, we'll be coming back at you. Thank you for listening and watching, and all of my worldwide fans. Please get in touch with us if you have any suggestions or things you want me to rant and rave about. TheMidnightSkeptic@gmail.com.